Okay. All right, we are live. Welcome back to the Lou Perez podcast. I'm your host, Lou Perez, and I am very excited to be joined by my next guest. He is an author. He has his first book, I believe, coming out soon. It's a memoir called Cis White Gay. Please give it up for Ben Appel. And there he is. Hey, Ben.
Hey, how are you?
I'm good. I have two kids, and one of them, the youngest, we just lost his binky, which is like his pacifier. So I don't think I'm gonna sleep tonight. But are you gonna sleep okay? I hope you.
Yeah, I think so. But is that the only one that you have? You don't have spares?
Well, that's the thing. I think my wife. I think her plan, because it isn't my plan, is you start off with a certain amount, and then as you lose them, then we eventually get to the point where there's only one left, and then that's lost. And then, the kid grows up and goes to college or something like that. But yeah, it had to come, on the night that I'm doing my podcast, him just, screaming bloody murder. And so that's where I am right now. So in the basement, hiding out right above my my laundry. So
Okay.
yeah,
Nice.
yeah. but thank you for being here. So I think the first thing I want to talk about is like you got a book coming out. So first off, congratulations. Is it your first book?
It is my first book. It should be out next year. I'm working on edits right now. Thank you. It's called Cis White Gay: The Making of a Gender Heretic. That is the tentative title right now. So yeah, just working on edits and getting everything finished and polished up for publication.
How did you feel like going back and writing a memoir? Did you feel how do you feel like going back and like exploring yourself or remembering who you were and all that? Was it weird? Did it come naturally? Was it a an exercise, a chore at some point?
I mean, it's pretty excruciating, to be honest. I'm so, hashtag blessed and can't believe I have this opportunity, all those things, fill in the blanks. But it's an excruciating process. It's not fun at all. It's the least fun thing I've probably ever done. Well, actually, no, I've done a lot of not fun things, but it's up there. And yeah, it's hard. It's just putting your life and different aspects of it in narrative form, separating yourself or kind of getting enough distance from it to tell a story about your life is a challenge. But this stuff isn't necessarily so difficult for me to write about, because I've been keeping a journal since I was like 9, so yeah, it's kind of like it's an old habit.
Yeah. Well, I feel like that's something when I hear that, like, that a grown man kept a journal since 9, I'm so jealous because I'm like, damn, I would love to know like what young Louis, at the time, what was going on in his mind at 9, at 10, all the way up through the years. But the closest I ever got to doing anything like that is when I was in high school. I became like a very literate guy, or at least wanted to come off like I read books and stuff. So I had these composition notebooks where I would do like free verse. I wasn't a rapper, so there's no rap lyrics in it, but I would go and I would write all this poetry, and a good amount of it was like like sexual poetry, right? All before I had ever had sex.
Okay.
So, going back and reading what, the high school kid thought sex was, for all the, emotions and textures and all that, it's, it's pretty, it's pretty silly. Did you go back like and read your journal from when you were 9 years
Oh
old?
yeah. Yeah, I mean, I started that number of years ago. I just thought, well, let me just unpack these things, and it was like my fourth grade teacher was the one that got me to start keeping a journal. She had us like all journal every day, and then I just kind of stuck with it. And I'll tell you, so I was this really sweet little gay boy, like just love Jesus. I was raised in a Christian fundamentalist community. I was on fire for the Lord, and I was just the sweetest little angel, and everybody loved me. So I was like expecting to open up these journals to see this like tome of like these Whitman-esque, uh, you know, musings about life and God and love, and just, like something that would rival like the works of, I don't know, the Dalai Lama or something, or Jesus himself, actually,
Right.
although he didn't really write, I guess. But anyway, and I was a little asshole, like a total. It was shocking to me how mean I was about my friends and my classmates. I mean, you know, I was homophobic. I was sexist, and it was pretty crazy.
Wow.
Yeah.
What and so so you're reading this, and were you able to connect with like the moments of like why you may have been that little asshole? You're like, oh, this makes sense, or was it sort of like a little like kind of bombshell?
Well, I guess I'll tell you, like, like I said, I went to like a tiny Christian school, and I was raised in this fundamentalist Christian community. So it was essentially a cult. And then we left that when I was like 12. And after we left that community, I became like OCD, like developing this form of OCD called scrupulosity, where I became obsessed with my moral fiber, like every time I would commit the smallest mistake or sin, I was convinced that God was going to just punish me and strike me down, or strike down my mother or somebody I loved. So my way of controlling things was to constantly pray for repentance and forgiveness. And so all of my journals after we left the community and I developed that disorder are all like, I love God, and I mean, like, they were just the most like Little House on the Prairie, like, and so going back further, I kind of had assumed that that would be the same tone, and it was just kind of very odd that while I was in that community, I guess because I was in it, and I've and if as long as we were in this cult, this community, I was safe and God loved me and I was okay, then I could be sinful. Like, I could make mistakes because I would be forgiven, because I was enclosed and protected in this little bubble. And then after we left, like I said, that was when I went off the deep end.
Wow. So your parents, I guess, got involved with,
Hmm.
this cult, right?
Hmm.
Do you know how they came to it?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, my mom, so it was technically like a covenant community, it's called, like, Amy Coney Barrett, the
Yeah.
Supreme Court justice. Okay, so
Right.
she belongs to she's a member of a covenant community, as far as I know. I mean, this is what I've read about her, called People of Praise, and that was like a sister covenant community to the group that I belong to, which was called the Lamb of God, and this was in Baltimore area. So it's like everybody lived in the same area, like in the same neighborhood. They called it the cluster. Um, the male leaders, there was like a lead coordinator, and then there were like four below him. My father was one of the coordinators, and then the female leaders were called handmaids,
Like
and
actual handmaids.
they
So,
were called handmaids. Yeah,
well,
yeah. They didn't wear like red cloaks
right.
or hats or anything, but they wore a lot of like long like dresses that, like they had made themselves, kind of thing, and they had long hair, and very like sister wives ish kind of. Um, but this was just in a suburban neighborhood outside of Baltimore. And so what brought my mom and my dad to it, this was when they were engaged to be married. So before my siblings and I came along, my mom had been raised in a Catholic church, and really like fire and brimstone, and she had like a lot of religious guilt, and she still wanted to be religious and like raise her kids as Christians. So she found this Bible study, like this worship group that was all these like reformed hippies in the 70s. Like they were coming out of, you know, the drug haze of the 60s and the 70s, and they were kind of like on fire for Jesus, you know, like and it was just all about love and grace and mercy and forgiveness. And she was like, this is awesome. This is nothing like what I grew up with. You know, it was all about like God loves you and forgives you, and just come on into the fold. But then so she and my father joined this, but then this community ended up getting linked up with this broader network of covenant communities called Sword of the Spirit. And that was when they became, the leaders really became kind of indoctrinated with this way of life to form this covenant community. And it became very dogmatic, very much about men's and women's roles. And women were, you know, the men were husband masters, and the women were really supposed to submit to their husbands. And it was very kind of Stalin-esque, like, you know, everybody would keep tabs on everybody else. There were people above you that you would kind of, you know, seek pastoral counseling from, but also kind of confess to, and they would bring like your secrets to the higher ups, and then it would trickle down the other side. It was just a lot of people were really harmed by it, and it eventually disbanded.
Did it disband like from the top up, like the sword of the spirit, like all the way
No,
down?
so actually, so Sword of the Spirit, as far as I know, it still goes on, although the leaders split up. Like there were two leaders. One of them, I don't know, I think he went like on an apology tour about the stuff that they had done, as far as I remember. Another one was, I think, accused of some kind of sexual impropriety. Don't quote me on that. I'm not sure. I think that's what it was. But uh, this community did break away from Sword of the Spirit, and then it kind of disbanded soon after that. People were just really unhappy with the direction that it took. It really kind of wrecked a lot of marriages.
Hmm.
And because, you know, suddenly women were being told that, you know, I mean, it was pretty bonkers. But I remember it very fondly because I was a kid. You know, all my best friends lived in the same neighborhood, like right down the street. We, you know, had this small school, and it was a great childhood. It really kind of didn't, my life didn't really implode until after we left. I'm glad we left. And it was mainly my mom's decision to leave because of the turn that it had taken. Um, but yeah.
Did your parents split? Was that
Hmm.
is that what
Yeah,
happened?
they split up about a year, a little less than a year after we left.
Uh-huh. Yeah, I always wonder
But we
like
were,
it. Oh, no, I
go
was gonna
ahead.
say I was always wondering like super religious families. Well, for one, it's very it's very frowned upon, I guess, in Catholicism to get a divorce. I mean, people do it, but
Yeah.
they, I guess, the right way to do it is to get like an official annulment or something like that from,
Hmm.
you got to write to your local bishop or go to the Pope, or I don't know how that works. My both of my
Hmm.
parents are, technically still living in sin, and I was born in sin because that was their that this is their second marriage, and they didn't do it in the church. But yeah, I always wonder in like super religious families, when the split happens, it's kind of like you're dealing with also like where the future religious teachings of the family, like which direction that's going to go. And
Hmm.
was that an issue? Was it like, or was your dad like still holding on to the remnants of the covenant or whatever?
I mean, he was more like, he was like the scholarly type that loved like biblical history, and he did become a leader in the community, like I said, but it was more because he had really great business acumen. Like he was a lawyer, and uh, you know, the word that the original members of the community had for newcomers that were like attractive candidates for leadership that would attract more people was called solid. Like my parents were very solid people,
Ah,
because, you know, it did attract a lot of wayward souls that you know, just needed a lot of help. So they kind of really glommed onto my father at the beginning, and really pushed him into leadership positions from the beginning. And he was the one that really wasn't spiritual. He wasn't into the prayer meetings at all. He wasn't into it. And my mom was like, well, I want to do this. And he's like, all right, well, then I'll do it with you. And then it became difficult in their marriage because he actually accelerated to leadership position, and she was considered for the role of a handmaid, but then she was told that she wasn't going to be one. And that was pretty devastating for her because she felt that she was very like spiritual and devout, and he really wasn't. Like during prayer time every day, she would be, worshiping and praying in tongues and reading the Bible. And then she would like go into his office and he would be like paging through Sports Illustrated, and she was like, it was difficult for them. But yeah, so after they left, my dad was just like, all right, whatever. You know, for the most part, he had some other business ventures going on, and then, but my mom was the one that initiated the divorce.
I'm just imagining, like the original 12 apostles, like Jesus looking around, like, yeah, we got a lot of fishermen. We need like a lawyer. We need an accountant. Like,
Hmm.
can somebody come
Hmm.
through that,
Yeah.
just understands this stuff? Like, we have a lot of other
Yeah.
problems we need to, take care of. Uh,
Yeah.
s- so you said your mom,
But my mom
yeah.
had a lot of guilt about it. I mean, for sure. Like my mom, she's not she I'm sure she's a Christian still. I mean, she and I are close, and I know she believes in God, and she's not very dogmatic, very religious. My dad passed away a few years ago. He
I'm
wasn't
sorry.
very religious through the rest of his life either. But my mom had a lot of guilt. Like I remember when I came out to her when I was like 16 or 17 or something, and she was like, "I just don't know if this is God's plan for you, but just like your cross to bear is your sexuality, mine is I divorced your father." Like it was always like this
Thanks,
kind
mom.
of like,
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah,
Okay.
exactly, yeah. I mean, it was the best she could do at the time, and now she's like, just a total fat gag. So, but she's great, she's great.
Yeah. And what is it like, being a young gay kid, in that environment? You talk about reading your
Mm,
memoir and it's very, homophobic and
yeah.
and sexist. I mean, do you even again, like I wish that I had kept like journals for myself at that time, like just trying to think of myself as like, a young kid who's discovering that he's attracted, attracted like I think uh one of the funny things that happened in my family. I must have been like 5 or 6 or something like that, and we were watching TV in our living room, and it was "Romancing the Stone" with Kathleen Turner,
I love
and
that movie.
and apparently my older brother looked over and could tell that I had a boner. I had a little boner, and they pointed it they pointed it out, and it's like, so even at that young age, like I was like, whatever that is on the screen, that woman, I'm attracted to it. So uh, I'm just wondering, did you have like similar things like that, like as a young kid?
Yeah, yeah, I mean, for sure. Oh gosh. Yeah. Look, I didn't. Oh man, I don't even know if I really want to go there with, but
No,
yeah,
it's
like
okay, whatever you.
I yeah, I mean, look, like when we were in this community, like I learned all about Sodom and Gomorrah and homosexuals, and AIDS was God's punishment for
Right.
these evil demons, and homosexuality was like the worst thing that you could sin that you could commit. So it was, as you can imagine, just a total joy to be ripped out of that community, essentially excommunicated and shunned, and I don't get to see my friends anymore. And then at the same time realizing that, oh, I'm gay, and then being tormented in my new school because I was a really effeminate kid. And then so it wasn't a fun time. All of those things coincided at the same time, and I realized like, oh fuck, I am a gay. I'm what I learned was the epitome of evil. And I'm not in that community anymore. I don't have these mentors and these teachers and these friends and these people protecting me and guiding me. I'm in this secular world, and it was in my new school. I mean, tormented. And so, yes, I was an effeminate kid in my old school, but there wasn't like an in crowd. It was such a tiny school. There were 4 kids in my grade, including me. So it wasn't like,
Four
I
kids?
was,
Four?
yeah, 4, right,
1, 2, 3, 4. Wow.
right. So I, uh, you know, didn't know how different I was, until it was pointed out to me, by my new classmates. And yeah, I mean, so at the time, I hadn't really sexually matured yet. My first crush was when I was like maybe 10 or 11. I went and saw this B movie North with Elijah Wood. He was my
Yeah.
age. Oh, you know that movie? Okay,
I know
good.
that
All right.
movie. Yeah.
I think you're like the only
Classic.
one.
The
And
classic.
it is a classic movie. It's very weird. Like I was like I anyway, but and I just fell in love. I was 11 and I was like, "Oh my god." But I didn't know what it was at the time. I just was like just obsessed. I had his pictures on my wall and I just loved him. And it was my first crush, but it was like a very, like I said, I hadn't gone through puberty, and then a few years later, I did. And when you're gay, you kind of realize first like what you're not into, because all your peers or most of your peers are interested in girls, so they're passing around Sports Illustrated magazines, and I'm just like sitting here looking at these images, like studying them, like you know this is supposed to do something for me, like, and kind of just faking it,
Yeah.
and like, why does it make me feel nauseous when I kiss a girl, and and then you realize, like, once you have an experience or two with someone of the same sex, oh, that's why. Okay,
Right.
this is what it's supposed to feel like,
Yeah.
so.
Yeah. What was it like? Like kissing girls. Did you have girlfriends? Like,
I
was
did.
the girls who thought like, oh my god, like I have the best boyfriend. His name is
Well,
Ben. We get along so well. He's a very handsome guy.
Well,
Yeah.
like, that's the thing, because I was a sweet kid, like, girls
Right.
felt really safe with me. I loved hanging out with girls. I had 2 older sisters, and, like, so, I had good fashion sense. I remember this girl that I guess I went out with, or maybe I don't remember. I got her, like, an outfit for like Valentine's Day, and she like loved it. You know what I mean? Like, it was they just liked being with me, and I guess I was a relatively cute kid. I was awkward and whatever, but they felt safe, and so yeah, I did. I had some girlfriends in seventh, eighth grade, and and I had to really fight the gay rumors. You know what I mean? Like, I once kids were like, "Oh, you're a faggot, are you a boy or a girl," etc. I was like, I had to. It was a full time job for me to defeminize myself and like just expunge every remnant of femininity. Like, I became a total, just constantly self scanning for so I changed the way I walked. I cut my hair. I deepened my voice. I changed the music I listened to. I mean, I really kind of became a shell of a human being in a lot of ways, because of, well, in some ways because of just as a survival tactic. And so yeah, girls liked me, and I had some girlfriends, and I had a girlfriend in high school, but I did kind of come out to her, like, her and my other best friend, we were like best friends, and we would all get high together, and I remember saying, like, I'm kind of into guys too, and like, there was the soccer player that I was obsessed with on the soccer team, and but then she and I ended up like kind of dating, and then we would make out and stuff, and but I was like, look, this isn't me. Like, I think I'm more into, I couldn't say the words gay at the time, but this was like when I was 16 or 17 maybe, but I said, I think I'm leaning towards the other way.
Yeah.
um yeah.
And it's such a different time too. I mean, we're I think around this same age. I'm 41. I think you
Yep,
just turned 40. Was that it?
I did.
Yeah. Happy. I think that when we first met in person, you had just turned 40, and
Mhm.
like, looking back, it's like it really is so different now. I think for gay kids than it was, in the 90s.
Mhm.
Like, I went to a Catholic high school, and there were a couple of guys who, everyone knew were gay, and but you didn't, you know, I don't know, like, what they went through, specifically when it came to, like, bullying and stuff like that, but the whole culture of, like, of dating and stuff, like, they weren't dating each other. We'd have no idea, like, they weren't obviously dating girls, so it's like, you think, like, what what was that social life like? You know, because it was so they were sort of kept out of the norm of you go and you get a
Hmm.
girlfriend, or um, whereas I feel like the, the kids seem to be a lot more open and like,
Hmm.
or maybe I'm wrong. I don't know kids anymore. Thank
Hmm.
God. No.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, it's a mess right now. It's a mess.
We
It's a mess for kids. I worry about the kids are not okay. The kids are
Yeah,
not
why don't
okay.
we? Yeah, maybe we can talk about that because, for one, at some point in time, uh, you became just cis white and gay,
Hmm.
and which I think is basically like you're basically a straight white man.
Essentially.
I mean, essentially, that's what you are. So, why don't we talk about that a little bit? How did
Yeah.
that happen? Who made you that? Who made you cis white and gay?
Well, I'll tell you, like, I write about this in the book, and that's kind of why it's called like the making of a gender heretic, just because I had volunteered for like the marriage equality campaign in Maryland, back in 2012, and I had met my now husband, and I, you know, I got involved in activism, and after we won that initiative, I worked on some, like, volunteered for trans rights legislation campaign, and I just became like on fire for a it was like a new mission for me. In a way, I guess maybe it had kind of like there was like a religious element to it. Um I was in my late 20s, and it felt great to feel like I'm on the right side of history and I'm going to make a difference and save people, and it was also very esteem building, when we won the marriage equality initiative, because it was voted on at the ballot box. um I couldn't believe that the majority of people in my state who voted thought that I should have the right to marry, like, because I was so convinced we were going to lose, like, we're never going to have a happily ever after, etc. And we we won that initiative, and so it really kind of was pretty transformative for me. I thought, wow, there's like a lot of stuff is possible here, and I really loved my now husband, like I said, and I just really wanted to marry him, and so after that campaign, I was just very much like, I want to do more with my life. At the time, I was a hairstylist in the Baltimore, D.C. area. My college career had gotten derailed by drugs and alcohol. I was really heavy into drugs and alcohol, and I had a lot, because all of that stuff that I talked about earlier just continued to compound, and I really self-medicated with drugs and alcohol, and I got into some really heavy stuff, and I had a lot of psych ward stays and whatnot. But then in my early 20s, I did get sober, and so I developed this career. And then in my late 20s, no, early 30s, I want to do more with my life. I want to go back to school, get my degree, be a writer, be a journalist, be an LGBTQ activist, and all this stuff. And so I did. I went back to school part time, and then I applied to Columbia, and so that's what brought my husband and I up to New York, because they have a program for non-traditional students. It's like, it's called the School of General Studies, and all of the students, you need like at least a year of time off in your college career, which I had had many years off.
Real life.
um
You need like
yeah.
a year of real life.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And so this, and everybody matriculates in, so you're just a part of the Columbia community, and so there's like people that are older than you in your classes and younger and all that stuff. And it was a great experience. I was there for 3.5 years. I graduated in May 2020. I studied, my major was nonfiction creative writing there, because I planned to just be a writer and essentially do what I'm doing, but not. I did not at all plan to be a heretic the way that I am. I was like, I was on fire. I was woke, next level woke. Like, my go-to news source was like HuffPost. Like, I would write angry diatribes on Facebook about these evil Republicans and all this stuff. And you know, but really, I just became completely disillusioned by the culture on the campus that I found there. I couldn't. My first semester began the week that Trump was inaugurated. So I was devastated by Trump's win at the time. I was, not excited about that. But I just thought, I'm just going to immerse myself in this school, and learn and educate myself and be like just the best activist and writer I can be. And then I realized that there was just this culture of censorship and purity policing and virtue. It so closely brought me back to the religious community that I had grown up in, and there were so many parallels. And like I said earlier, that kind of OCD of scrupulosity of constantly thinking that I'm bad and wanting to repent. I had a kind of resurgence of that disorder was a because everybody was policing everyone's speech, and you just never knew if you were going to slip up or say the wrong thing. And I had been, and suddenly I was reduced entirely to my identity. I was this, fairly masculine presenting, homosexuality, gayness. It was irrelevant. It was all about gender essentially. And so I wasn't queer. I was just this cis white gay, and I was I was an assimilationist. I had married, and I was, you know, uh, I wasn't adequately anti-capitalist and all of these things. I mean, it's just,
Did you wear khakis, like khaki pants? I think
I did
yeah,
I sometimes I wore shorts, and has mostly jeans.
mostly jeans.
And it was very, very like just disillusioned. I did not know what was happening. I was floored by what was going on, and by my response to it, because I'm in my 30s and I'm a critical thinker, and feeling like this doesn't seem, like your anti-racism is actually kind of racist. Like there was just, and you're like everything seemed so regressive suddenly. And then of gender stuff, I just saw what was going on with kids, and looking back on my past and my childhood, and knowing how effeminate I was, and kids literally saying, "Are you a boy or a girl?" And me thinking, like, at the time I wanted to be a girl. I felt like, I was more comfortable with girls. And if I had grown up now, and if I had gone to some guidance counselor and they said, well, maybe the bullies are right, maybe you're a girl. I mean, who knows if I would have glommed onto that, because I had such religious guilt about my sexuality too. So I thought, well, if this is a medical thing, then I might have thought I can fix it. I can be cured. Um, I can just, I can be a girl, and I would just be, so I really became concerned, and I kind of went down the rabbit hole of like, what is trans medicine? Where did this start? Where did hormones come from? Why? And just really looking at what are the demographics that are being treated. And there's a really shifting demographic, but a lot of these kids historically have been gay, same-sex attracted, and there just isn't room for a lot of gender nonconformity in society. And so we're in a lot of cases medicalizing gender nonconformity, and we're medicalizing kids who would otherwise grow up to be gay.
Yeah, and I definitely want to talk more about that. I just want to go back to
Yeah.
there's something, I think there's something about people who like yourself, who are in recovery. Do you still call yourself like in recovery from like drugs and alcohol? Is that how you refer to it?
Yeah.
Or
Yeah, I do.
because I think there's like in my experience, like talking with people, there's like a humility and also a willingness to talk about dark, fucked up things that either
Hmm.
they've done or have happened to them in the past. So I
Hmm.
think from the standpoint of like of a writer, especially writing a memoir,
Hmm.
it's sort of like at the beginning I asked you like, oh, is it difficult to write? And it's sort of like, well, you're kind of like the perfect person to write your memoir, not just because it's your memoir, but also because you sort of have been gifted, if you want to call it that, this ability to take on that stuff that a lot of people would just rather just put away completely.
You're right about that. Yeah, like it is I agree. It has definitely prepared me to, because I've had to, to be sober and to stay sober. You have to really examine these things. Otherwise, if you don't deal with them, you're going to drink about it and use, and you can't. So you have to do the work to really confront a lot of those demons from your past and face it head on.
Yeah. And with the program you talk about at Columbia, I mean, it sounds like a great program. It reminds me of I got my MFA at City College in New
Hmm.
York,
Hmm.
and well, it was a similar thing. What was cool about that program is, you would look around and you'd have people who are 50 years old. You'd have people in their 30s, 40s, people
Hmm.
going to school part time who had lived a good chunk of life. Now, when I got in, I hadn't actually lived that much of life. I was like, I think I was like 25 or something like that when I went in. I was doing comedy, sketch and improv comedy. But sitting around with people who've actually, they weren't kids. They weren't like 19-year-old kids. I think was a really I think that was really important for me, for my development, I guess, is writing and whatnot.
When did you do that? What year?
What year did I get out? I think I graduated 2008 or 2009.
Man, you were just ahead of the implosion of the nightmare that MFA programs have become. Did you do a fiction?
Yeah, I did
Yeah,
creative writing.
yeah.
And yeah, so it's like, yeah, maybe you could talk about the implosion, because what you just described, I'm like, oh wow, that sounds like a really cool program, but then there's all
Look,
this
it's a
stuff
great
lurking.
opportunity. I mean, it was a great opportunity. Like I couldn't believe my luck. I still can't believe my luck. I mean, I was this, I got to go and study at one of the best universities in the world, and I got a great education. Um, and you know, um, but universities are just hotbeds for this gross kind of regressive indoctrination with, and not to sound like all conspiratorial, but I mean it's just these critical theories and postmodernism and queer theory. So much of what's taught is through the lens of these theories that distort, and that deny truth and shared reality, and it's really not good. And so I had to do a lot of extra work to round out my education, um, so as I wasn't receiving everything through this kind of distorted lens. I really had to do the extra work. So it was a great experience, but you know kids, because there's this air of self-censorship and fear, um you know you become kids become they become very afraid to speak honestly and say what they think, and then suddenly everybody starts sounding the same and speaking the same and saying the same stuff. Look, like, universities are essentially like a Twitter feed. Like, I mean, they really are. It's just social media is an extension of the university campus and vice versa. And I can't stress that enough. And so, I did do an MFA program. I was so lucky to be accepted, to this great MFA program after I graduated from Columbia. And I lasted a semester in it before I wrote something, problematic, that on my private Substack that I put behind a paywall, called The New Homophobia in Higher Education. And I used pseudonyms and I just wrote about some of this stuff. And someone in the program saw it and took screenshots of the problematic parts and passed it around the program. And DEI got involved and workshops were canceled. And I left. I fled. This was the beginning of my second semester. And I was like, get me the hell. I am losing brain cells. This is killing my intellect, my creativity. Everybody was just, it was like the only way I could compare these seminars and these classes to was like a church youth group. Like it was just um, a toxic, gross, diminishing atmosphere. And so I got the fuck out of there.
Where was the MFA program that you were?
Oh, Washington University in St. Louis.
Oh wow. And
Hmm.
so the new homophobia, like what
Yeah,
how's
I
it
mean, it was,
how's it different from the old one? How
yeah.
have they updated it? The new
So
flavors.
so so there's this. what it really was, look, like so many people, everybody's queer now, and the rainbow alphabet is just expanded to include everybody essentially, but like, like everybody, but strictly, well, I don't know what maybe,
but it actually seems
but
like there's a lot of people who describe themselves as queer, and then you're like,
right,
well, who are you dating? And it's like, oh,
right.
you're just straight,
You're
but
just straight,
you're just
right?
calling yourself queer. Yeah.
And so there's a lot of what queer is not like it doesn't even have so much to do with sexuality. It has to do with the politics. It has to do with being properly anti-racist in the new definition, the kind of Kendiism definition of anti-racism, be anti-capitalist, be anti-heteronormativity, anti-cis heteronormativity, all of these things, and it's a politics. And so what happens is that this radical queer movement has attracted a lot of just boring ass straight, not boring ass, like, but just run of the mill straight people that want a kind of queer identity and want to look. I mean, we live in this intersectional society where victimhood is like capital now. I mean, it's cultural cachet and it's actual capital. I mean, people are, bottom. So for folks that are straight and white, I mean, what can they do? They can't pose as black unless they're like, Rachel Dolezal, or get really creative with it. They got to be queer and they got to be non-binary, and they got to, and so this community opened up, and then suddenly all these people came flooding in, and it gave so many people this excuse to just be blatantly homophobic about cis gays and how we're this and that, because they're like, oh, I'm in your community, I'm one of you, like I can critique, and I can call my own people fag and this, that. It gave so many people an excuse to just to express this. And look, growing up, you homophobia when you see it. You know what I mean? Like, what it is, and you can sense it, and you can smell it, and you can feel it, and it gave a lot of people just an excuse to do that. And so also in that same way, there was these attitudes about there was only one way to be gay, and it was to be queer. It was to be to fight for, to be a part of society, to fight for marriage, to fight for, to be, it was, you're this assimilationist fascist bootlicker, and really what I should be a part of is, besides wearing the uniform, which is, shaving half my head and growing out the other side and wearing eyeliner and nail polish and having different pronouns, and possibly medicalizing and taking estrogen, because that's, I should, my goal should be to just raise Western institutions, just tear it all down to build this queer, socialist utopia. And anything short of that, and anything if you're not in line, you're either a centrist scum or you're a fascist bootlicker, and that's it.
Yeah. And it's so odd. In my book, I have a chapter.
But the thing is that, and I'll just say really quickly,
go.
like, the thing is that so many gay people have fought very, very hard for acceptance, and they've put together organizations and fought for these things, and so these new queers are degrading and setting us back is really alarming, because we're caught in the undertow of it. We're gonna absolutely, but I knew this from the very beginning when I started seeing these things go on. It's like, who's going to be blamed for this? It's going to be gays, and so it's just, there's a lot of hatred towards the old gay guard, who made a lot of progress. Anyway, go ahead. You were saying in your book.
Yeah, I mean, so I have a chapter. It's I Am Become Death. And it's not about the the atomic bomb. It's about voting third party, and how I was blamed for, obviously Donald Trump, getting into office because I voted third party in
Right.
New York. In New York, that
Oh
Hillary
my
won.
God. Yeah.
But I was accused of being responsible for the deaths of trans people because I voted, in such a way that allowed Donald Trump to get into office. So it was like, 6,000 degrees of separation between,
Yeah.
my vote and having, the blood of, trans people on my hands. And
Uh-huh.
what I found interesting was that the person accusing me of doing it was a gay man in his late 50s and 60s. And what I found funny about it is like, I knew gay men of his generation, and it's like
Mhm.
gay men of his generation, they are attracted to men. They love men. They don't love biological women
Mhm.
who are trans men. And,
Mhm.
you know, my response to that is something along the lines of, well, wait a minute, if I'm responsible for deaths for voting, how are you, how many are you responsible for by not including, these little petite, how did I call it? Um, Tom of Finland's, in your world, a little 5'1", butchy, little girl that would have been a gymnast, but no, she's a man now. And
Mhm.
it just got me, you're talking about, this stuff. It just got me thinking of, you know, there were gay spaces for gay men to get together, to hook up, to have, your culture. And I don't know which one who was the first to invade it. Was it like fucking bachelorette parties who like, oh, we got to go party at the gay bars and stuff? But it's like there's like a complete lack of respect and boundaries for no, like let these men have their space and hook up as they want, and because they fought so fucking hard to get that.
Mhm.
It's my little rant on that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, look, like, if are you familiar with the Trevor Project?
Yeah, yeah. I actually years ago, I actually how many years ago? I think I gave like $20 to it, something like that.
Okay.
No,
So it was, yeah, I mean, it was a great organization helping young people, fighting, suicide rates or depression and helping people. But they now on their website, they define gay as an identity term for, and this is on Trevor. So this is on Trevor Project's website, which is for youth. Okay. An identity term for someone who experiences same gender attraction and sometimes refers to someone who only experiences same gender attraction. Commonly used to describe people who identify as men or masculine of center who are attracted to some other men. Okay. Okay. What the fuck is that?
yeah,
Right. I mean, it's it's essentially, I just worry, so I would never in a million years send some kid that's struggling with his sexuality to an organism like that where they're confusing the hell out of them. And also, I mean, you know, homosexuality is same-sex attraction. Now, this topic drives me crazy because that does not mean that there are not gay men or gay identified men, males out there who would or have slept with trans men, meaning trans identified females who are very masculine. I know that that happens. Okay. Those people are bisexual. All right.
right.
You know, um, and I don't like the kind of cruelty that kind of comes along with this discourse a lot. Where like a lot of people say, "Oh, I would, never have sex with you. You're disgusting." And I don't see that a lot, but I don't like this discourse about this. But I think that there is nothing wrong with, the new lingo is, this idea of calling gay people, genital fetishists,
Yeah.
for wanting to have strictly same sex partners. which is just, it's just that just all of these things, it is these, they're all remnants of the kind of conversion therapy, and it really is conversion 2.0 for gay kids and for gay people, to kind of demand that they really look at themselves and really go deep and see why they would refuse a trans woman with a penis if they're a lesbian, because some women do have penises, and they really and it's just, it's like the discourse is disgusting. The discourse is just gross. These trans activists and other activists that put out these, oh, genital fetishist, and oh, same gender attraction, they do not speak for the entire trans community by any stretch of the imagination. They don't speak for gays and lesbians either. But the sad reality is that these organizations that were founded by gay and lesbian people have been completely captured by this kind of queer theory / radical trans theory oriented approach to advocacy and activism, and it's harming a lot of people, and a lot of gays and lesbians feel just completely left out in the wild.
Yeah, some of it seems like almost seems like they're trying to see like what they can get away with, because when I hear something like, you know, the cotton ceiling, breaking through the
Mm-hmm.
cotton ceiling, meaning,
Mm-hmm.
like trans women trying to shame lesbians into having sex with them, right? I'm like, you got to be fucking like you got to be kidding me. It sounds like such a straight guy move, like a bro move, to try to be like, what, like, yo, you're a bigot if you don't want to sleep with me, and
Mm-hmm.
then there are like lesbians who are actually having like really heart to heart conversations about this, saying like, I don't want to be, I don't want to exclude you, I don't want you to think that I'm a bad person and all that. And it's like, it's your body,
Mm-hmm.
you're gay, like no one can force you to have sex with somebody that you don't want to have sex with or you're not attracted to. It's mind-blowing, really. It's boggling.
It's mind-blowing, but that's really just like the abolition of sex that is underway, or that people are attempting now. The consequences are kind of endless, when it comes to medicine and health and healthcare and relationships and everything. um, it's there's a reason why we have to acknowledge sex differences, and why it's important.
Yeah.
Many reasons, a million reasons.
Yeah. Yeah, and you talking about being like a young kid, effeminate, and it's
Hmm.
like uh, the young kids, who were just like you at your age. Now they're being told, well, you might actually be a girl,
Hmm.
which you were on when I first heard you were on Andrew Sullivan's
Hmm.
podcast with the Dishcast, I think it is, which was
Hmm.
great, and it was such a great episode. And Andrew has told this story a couple of times, at least that I've heard on his podcast, about being a young boy in England in a devout Catholic family, and I believe it was his grandmother saying something like, in regards to him and his brother, it's like, well, at least you have one real boy, something like that.
Hmm.
Uh, and Andrew's father, to his credit, I get a little choked up when I think about it, saying, no, he's 100% a boy, and it's like how important that was for Andrew to hear that. Then how many young boys don't hear that, from their parents. And now, you think about it, that's back, Andrew's probably like, in his 50s. And now, cut to 2023. And now, you have an effeminate boy who, hey, he might not be into rugby or football or roughhousing. He might, and saying like, oh, well, yeah, we have to fix him. We
Hmm.
have to make him her, right.
Hmm.
And I don't know, it's really, really hard to stomach. So,
It is hard to stomach, and I mean, look, yeah, it is hard to stomach. Anyway, I mean, look, puberty blockers and all this stuff. stunting children's developmental and physical development, you know, to supposedly give them time to think, to figure out their gender identity. It's just, to me, it's a crime against humanity. It really is. Oops, I lost you for a sec. I can't hear you.
Sorry, I muted myself. There we go. I was probably about to say something stupid, so thankfully I muted myself. You know, before we get going, like I'm so excited for you, especially with the book coming out. I know you still have a lot more work to do on it, you know, because you know it's the whole editing stage. Something I wanted to talk about. I get excited every time I hear somebody was a hairstylist. Used to cut hair. This is gonna sound weird. My dad's a butcher, right? A butcher by trade, and there's so
Okay.
few butchers. Like, so when you meet a butcher, like, oh wow, you meet a butcher. I don't meet a lot of people who cut hair or have cut hair. So in a way, I'm like, wow, that's pretty cool. How long did you cut hair for?
For 13 years.
13 years.
So yeah, so I really fell into it. It was like I was fresh out of the psych ward. I had just gotten kicked out of my mom's house. I was drunk. And I ran into a friend from high school at the grocery store, and she said, "What are you doing with your life?" And I said, "Oh, I'm thriving." And she was like, "Well, you know, you can come do this apprenticeship, um, cosmetology." And I was like, "All right." And so maybe the next day or 2 days later, who knows when, she picked me up and took me in, and about 3 months later, I got sober. But I barely held on to this job, you know. But yeah, I did a 2-year apprenticeship under this woman in outside of Baltimore. Um, she was this Thai woman who was like literally like 4'8", and I was like, you know, 6'2", and we would like do blowouts together, like, you know, on the same, you know, she would be like standing on a stool, and I started doing her root color touch ups and shampooing and all this stuff, and then I learned, and I kind of had a knack for it because I was always a really creative person, and you know, meanwhile, like I said, I was getting my life together personally, getting sober and recovering. So this career kind of just coincided with that. And then it became a really lucrative, successful career, but I didn't want to do it forever. I got really burnt out, and you know, but I did it for a long time.
Well, the way that you describe how you got into it, it sounds like, you know, you're like, just got out of recovery. I was drunk. I signed up for the army. I enlisted in the Marines. You
Yeah,
know,
exactly.
that's kind of like it could have easily have gone that way. It's like, yeah, man. Then I'm, you know, here I am in friggin', you know, Kabul, you know, shooting at people.
Right?
It could have easily
What
have
if
gone
I
that
had
way.
run into a friend that day that had just enlisted and was like a recruiter?
Right.
I could have gone in a completely different direction.
Yeah. Yeah.
I would be I would be jacked, very traumatized.
A lot of
Who knows what else?
PTSD. You know, like the
A lot of
uniform looks
PTSD.
great, but
Yeah.
nobody talks about the PTSD under the uniform.
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
I always think of my mother was a beautician,
Mhm,
and early on at her salon, everyone there who worked there and owned it were all gay Puerto Rican guys, and I often think about like that generation because they're all gone from, and they went early from, you know, AIDS,
yeah.
um, and the funniest fucking guys,
Mhm,
funniest dudes. They were so good to my mother. I just have nothing
mhm,
but, you know, just wonderful uh, you know, memories of them. And they cut hair, man. They cut hair.
mhm.
So, you know, somewhere in my heart, all the hairstylists
Aw, I love
out
that. Where
there.
did you grow up?
Queens. Yeah,
Oh,
Queens, New
okay,
York.
yeah.
Yeah,
Oh, great. Okay, yeah.
yeah.
Oh.
So, Ben, thank you so much for joining me. And you have a Substack. Where can people check out your
Yeah,
stuff?
so I'm on Twitter. It's just Ben Appel, Benappel, is my handle. And then I do have a Substack that I do contribute to, although I'm a little behind right now because of the book. But my book should be out next year, Cis White Gay. But yeah, you can find me. The links are on Twitter, and stuff like that. So
Awesome. We're gonna
thanks,
end.
Lou.
Got it.